Now, before Dave jumped on, you said that you were at a hurricane briefing. Is that in your capacity as the poetic ambassador?
Yes, they invited me here to read poems about hurricanes. No,
Rhyme or free, it doesn't matter to me. It's my bad poetry. Good day, and welcome to My Bad Poetry, a podcast that Dave and I are still doing somehow. And amazingly, others have been so gracious enough to join us and bring their voices and bad poetry to the conversation. Today, we are joined by the poet ambassador for the Miami-Dade County Mayor's Office in Florida, though I would assume this is outside her official duties. Nicole Tallman is an editor for the Blue Mountain Review and the author of the recently published chapbook Something Kindred, a heartbreaking examination of grief and loss. A book that includes the line, "I love deep conversations with people I'll never see again." I'm not sure if either of those stipulations will be true here, but Nicole, we are honored to have you in conversation with us today.
well, thank you so much, Dave and Aaron, for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure for me.
Yeah, this is really cool for us because, we are not great at poetry, but we get to talk to people who actually know what they're talking about.
Not only are you an author of poetry and an ambassador, but you're also an editor. So you kind of, you know all aspects of the trade here.
Yeah.
I do what I can, yes, to be pretty well versed in poetry. So it's something I've been passionate about since I was very young. So this is it took me actually a while though to get into poetry. I don't know if I told you this or not, but I didn't start publishing my poetry until 2020.
Oh,
I'd written
wow.
since I'd written since I was very small, but I didn't actually attempt to publish it until the pandemic. I think it might have been a product of feeling my mortality
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to get the poetry out there. And I also just didn't really feel comfortable publishing it until my mother died, which I don't know if that's strange to admit, but it's the truth. And then I kind of had the perfect material. I wanted to write something to help me process my grief over my mother's death. And so I started writing these poems. I didn't even know it was actually going to be a book or a chapbook. I just started writing, and I put something together, and I had a person reach out to me, Clifford Brooks. He's the founder of the Southern Collective Experience, and that's the press that's over the Blue Mountain Review. I'm now a poetry editor there, and Clifford just said, "Hey, I like what I've seen. Would you be interested in publishing a book?" And I said, "Well, of course, I would love that." So that's how it all happened very quickly, I must tell you. I'm very, very fortunate in that. I know there are poets who spend years and years and years putting their work out there, but something just clicked for me. I'm very, very, very fortunate for that.
Yeah,
That's
something
wonderful.
kindred is powerful.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, and the mix of prose and poetry, your interpolations, is that the right word? The confessions that are
Hmm.
sprinkled throughout, that kind of transition between the poems, they carry a lot of weight, but there's also some humor in there as well, I have to admit. Which is strange to say. I don't know. I was deeply moved by this work.
Well, I think it's important, at least for me personally. I guess I have this tendency, even when stuff is serious, I try to find the light and the humor in it. So that was an intentional rhetorical move on my part. I didn't want to leave. I think a lot about audience when I'm writing, and I think a lot of it has to do with my background in speech writing and just when I'm putting together anything, whether it's poetry or it's a speech or a piece of correspondence, I'm always thinking about the audience and how I'm making them feel. And I knew I was taking them through this very heavy grief journey. And so I wanted to find ways to at least lighten it along the way a little bit. And I think you'll notice even towards the end, where the last poem I end on is one I think that's kind of a hopeful poem.
Yeah.
At least that's my, that's what I tried to achieve with it, focusing one line on a time. I wrote it one line at a time, actually,
Mm.
to remind myself of what there was left in this world to love while I was grieving. And it was a very, very, I guess, cathartic exercise for me to go through that. And I had to stop at some point because I had a book that I had to deliver, but that poem could have gone on forever, one line at a time,
Yeah, no, that's the poem we drew from here with the "I love deep conversations." And to bring this conversation into the line of sharing bad poetry, Dave, do you have something for us today?
I have a beautiful poem that I worked very hard on, by which I mean a terrible poem that is not very good at all. So this is my poem. Again, no title because I can't do titles apparently, so I'm in trouble. Oh, sanitizer, hope for my life. I leave you in my car, safety from the strife. Diaper changes, park trips, the fish slime covered hand. You save my days, but if only you smelled a little more bland.
Wow.
Yep. That's beautiful, right?
The ode to the car hand sanitizer is needed in this time.
Very useful.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I actually think it's salvageable. There are parts of it I like. I must tell you, it's very relatable. I'm not a huge fan of the rhyming, but
yeah.
I think it could be a prose poem. I think
Literally
you could turn that into something.
The most forced rhymes in all of history. But yeah.
I like how Nicole, you're immediately pivoting to your editor self. Where you're like, there's something salvageable there. Well, Nicole, it's my understanding that after hearing our inaugural episode with guests, you may have dug out your own old private journals from high school. I don't know if that was inspired by us or not, but we have photos of the pages of your private journal from high school. So what can you tell us about this journal and these poems that we are about to dive into?
Wow. I feel like they need no introduction, but I will say this. So yes, I was inspired by you. It's something I had been thinking about for a while, though. I had this journal in my mind, and I had been listening to past episodes of the podcast, and I had heard other people bringing out their journals, and I said, I'm going to try to dig something out. So I found my journal that was given to me as a birthday present by my best friend in high school named Allison. For my 17th birthday. And it's interesting because this journal, like I said earlier, I come from a very small town. So, selections, this was before the internet, you could buy stuff online. So selections were a little limited, but she saved her money and she bought me this journal. It has a vase with various grandma kind of flowers on the cover of it. And she knew my favorite color at the time was purple. So she wrote here, Nicole, this is to write your truly admirable poetry in. Happy 17th birthday.
A lot of hope in there. That's good.
Yeah, right? With affection, Allison. So, she's never seen the poems that I've written in this journal. But there's something lovely about the fact that I remember writing poems similar to the two that I'm going to read for you, and my friends thinking they were just outstanding, telling me what an amazing poet I was, how gifted, asking me if I would write and read their eulogies when they died. We were a little dark and goth, obviously. And I said, oh, yes, of course. So I have two very short poems for you that I would say are some of my finest work from my teens. And I'll tell you, I've always been a little, I would say, dark in certain ways. And I was very inspired by Emily Dickinson. Now, I don't know if you're going to be able to see any correlation between Emily and me when I read you these poems. And I don't know that I'm going to get through them without bursting into laughter, but I'm going to try to compose myself so I can read them for you.
Yeah. How about we do it one at a time? If do either of these, they look like they don't have titles. Am I right?
They don't, because Emily Dickinson didn't have titles.
Right. Oh, that makes
there's
the connection. Okay.
Right. And I thought I was Emily Dickinson.
That's
I thought
also,
it was that.
Yeah, that's also why I didn't title mine. I'm the modern Emily Dickinson.
Right, totally.
Yeah,
I see that. So yeah, I'll read them separately for you. The first one is I think extra special because I wrote it on Christmas Day.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, you see at the bottom where it says December 25th, 1994.
This is awesome. Okay.
So that makes it, I think, just even better that this was going through my mind on Christmas in 1994. So this is my first untitled poem for you. Bitter, bitter, filled with anger, enraged feelings thrive inside. Cringing, tensing, almost exploding until I find my peace of mind.
Beautiful.
Right? I mean, my friends, I know if I read this to them now, they would give me a standing ovation, just like they did when I was 17.
Oh, man. Okay, so first impressions, I noticed that you're not doing full rhymes, but there's like bitter, anger, thrive, and side, find and mind. So there's some, if not complete rhymes, there's assonance there. But
I was half expecting it to be more Macbeth, more bitter, bitter, toil and trouble.
I
really want to dive into why on Christmas Day. Do you have any clue?
Well, I'll tell you, I just think this was a general teen angst kind of thing. I don't recall anything in particular happening on this Christmas. I think I was just moody, generally speaking. So I will say that, it was an age where I think that I was struggling a lot with my sexual orientation. And I think that this might have been one of my ways of getting those feelings out without really saying what they were. So growing up in a really small town, people in the 90s didn't necessarily talk about being gay. I think this might have been one of my ways of expressing those feelings without actually saying what was going on with me. So I think this might have been a little bit about that.
Totally. Yeah. That actually brings a lot of light to this.
Right. That opens this up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because then that last line, as cis-het white guy, it's not an experience I would be able to understand. But I think that, I also grew up in a small town. Just being different from other people, I struggle to find words to put to like who I was and who I wanted to be and who I wanted others to think I was. So that last line actually now kind of speaks to me in a new way.
Finding that peace of mind, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then enraged feelings that thrive inside. Were you still fully closeted at that time, or?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, up until I was about 21 years old. I went through college and everything, and then it was really when I was 21 where I actually had a conversation with my parents and told them what was going on. But when you're going through high school especially, it's a really, there's a lot of pressure. Right. I was an only child as well. So I think that there was extra pressure on me to be the perfect child. And I always strove to do everything that I could to deliver that. You know, I did beauty pageants. I was a cheerleader. You know, I dated the captain of the basketball team, all these things that, you know, girls are supposed to do, right? Back in
Right.
that time, to be perfect and accepted. And so, yeah, I think, yeah, there was just, you know, there was a lot going on at that time in my life for sure. And I didn't know what to do with it. I was confused. Like, I mean, I can remember being 6 years old and being attracted to girls, but I didn't know what to do with it because it's not like it was something that was modeled on TV or that I
Oh, yeah.
knew people, right, who were gay. And so I didn't quite know what to do with it. I really didn't. So I would just, you know, I would date boys and just kind of think, oh, I'm going to, you know, eventually I'm going to feel this attraction that I'm supposed to feel, but it just never happened. And then once I got to college, that's when I was really introduced to people who were LGBTQ.
Mhm.
And then I started to say, oh, okay, well, you see other people who have similar feelings, and then you start to feel like it just might be okay to express those feelings. So yeah, college was a really pivotal time for me, I think, to be able to understand what was really going on.
Yeah. So your 17-year-old self um, wasn't there yet, just didn't have the experiences. So it comes out in this lovely work here.
Yes, absolutely.
Now you've kind of convinced me that this has like substance.
Yeah, to borrow a line from someone I know, there's something redeemable in this.
Yes, I think we could workshop this.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh God, no, I don't know that I really know workshop it. Oh my goodness.
What I love about this is you sign it.
Right? Because I thought I was so good that someone was going to want this one day. Like this, I was building my archive so that when I was a famous poet, people would see the development, the progression of my poetry. And this was an autographed piece that I was leaving for my fans in my mind when I was 17. I remember doing that intentionally, really thinking that it was going to be important, like an archival piece at some point.
And you know it would be worth more because it happened on Christmas Day. There'd be that mystique around it, like what present like disappointed her.
Exactly. It's very intentional. No, but I did this very, very frequently. I just picked out two of them for you because they were the ones that made me laugh the most. But I did this almost every day. I have a ton of these little notes.
Oh,
Wow. What is this? This is kind of completely off topic. What is this? It's like a profile of a face. It
With
looks
the
like a
wavy
stamp.
hair?
Yeah.
So that was the standard Michigan 90s. What do you call this? Like it was just a little design that actually was on quite a lot of stationery. I don't know if you've ever seen it before, but yeah, it was just like a little 90s cool little design motif on that was kind of common on. I remember again, small town, limited options and supplies. But yeah, I don't know. I actually, now that I look at it, I kind of like it. I think it's kind of cool, kind of retro cool.
Yeah, it's
kinda
very
interesting.
minimalist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm looking here. Our next poem is over a year later, so we get to see the advance in your poetic abilities. Oh, one thing before we move on to the second one, I do want to acknowledge you at least kind of edited your poetry.
Yeah.
Do you remember if that was during the period of writing, or did you come back to these poems?
So I think I did that while I was writing it.
Okay.
Sometimes I couldn't decide which word I wanted, so I'd write like like 3 or 4 different words, and then I'd decide which one I wanted later. So yeah, I still am not clear on which word I wanted in that second poem. I think it was confused though, even though I'm crossing it out. I think confused was what I wanted. So I
Okay.
don't know, because I'm
Yeah.
boggling, puzzling, I don't know, but whatever. Confused is what I would go with as my final edit there, even though there's a lot of like scribbling and crossing out.
Yeah.
Well, let's go with that then. Let's hear this second poem with confused as your final edit.
Okay. Complicated is my life, often confused and melancholy, like freshly woven spider webs and tangled vines of ivy.
Okay. We get a direct rhyme there.
We do?
Melancholy? Ivy?
Mm.
Ah, fine.
Yeah, I didn't quite hit on that one,
I
but I do
know.
I like the imagery. I must say, I think the imagery is solid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some nice similes there. Woven spider webs and tangled vines of ivy. Nice. I just think of Avril Lavigne, but that's just my
Oh my God.
that just shows my generation. It's like the minute the word complicated comes up,
Oh
I'm
wow.
singing it in my head there.
Well, I think I was ahead of my time,
You were,
actually. Yeah,
yeah. Avril Lavigne kind of stole from you there.
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm gonna go with that.
So May 5th, 1995. Any idea?
I think it goes back to the same theme I was talking to you about earlier. I think this was my first I would have been in college now.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that I was again exploring what the process, I guess reconciling my feelings surrounding my sexual identity. I think that is what this poem is about. And having feelings for people and not knowing how to tell them either that you had feelings for them, because especially it's a very difficult thing. I mean, when you're attracted to someone of the same sex, you don't know for sure whether or not they're going to return those feelings, right? And especially when you develop friendships with people, sometimes it can become very confusing when you have friends, and then you might start to feel like feelings for your friends, right? It's a really, really difficult conundrum to be in. So I think at this point I was starting to experience that, where I was starting to have attractions to people who were my, supposed to be female friends, and knowing that they were straight and that obviously wasn't going to work, and trying to reconcile and whether or not to tell them about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that was what was predominantly going on at this stage.
Yeah.
This is actually a really good conversation to be having, because we're in Pride Month.
I thought
Yeah,
the same
exactly.
thing. I was like, how serendipitous. I love that. Yeah.
It's reminding me of, again, coming from a small town myself, the panic that I had in high school as a theater guy, as someone who really enjoyed musicals and all this kind of stuff, and, like getting to being close friends with guys and going, am I gay? And kind of the difficulty of my family being a little more repressed around all of these things, and that not being something I could even entertain, let alone talk to anybody about. I feel like this is a little bit speaking to me in that. That's yeah.
Very interesting. I would say that college is that same experience for me of getting to know people in the LGBT community, and finally kind of learning like, oh, it's just something that should be talked about normally.
Right. Something that I fundamentally misunderstood when I was in high school.
Yeah. Small town Midwest is not the best place for having those conversations. And hopefully it's getting better.
Yeah, I think it may be. I have even noticed I do go back to Michigan at least once a year, and going to Grand Rapids specifically, I have noticed quite an evolution
Mm.
in the development of, and also seeing more people, and actually seeing a neighborhood. I was surprised to see that the last time I went to visit. There was a clear section of the city that had LGBTQ flags.
Yeah.
It was like a little neighborhood, and that to me was, I can remember there were gay clubs, and there was actually a gay bookstore, but they were, in a little seedier sections of town, and
Mm,
they were very, very hush hush.
right.
And people didn't necessarily really talk about going there, but there seemed to be a lot more openness. It is a very, very Dutch Reformed,
Mm,
Mm.
Catholic
Mm-hmm.
as well type of area. So there is a little bit of, it's a very family oriented type of environment, I think, in Michigan for the most part, in the sections of it that I'm referring to.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I do see greater openness than I did before, and also a diversity of people. Growing up there, it was predominantly white, and you're starting to see a lot more people of color.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's just diversifying in a lot of different ways, not just for LGBTQ, but for, I guess, just greater acceptance of people from varying backgrounds, not being so, what's the word that I want? Not really, I guess,
Homogenous.
homogenous, but also like not being so, do I want to say xenophobic? I don't know, not
Mm.
having a little bit more openness to people who are different and openness to change than what I saw when I was growing up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the beauty of the world opening up in that way. People who get to meet, or straight people who get to meet gay people, or cis people who get to meet trans people, and just understand, oh, they're just a person like me. There's less of that fear, and that goes for. I still live in a small town, and being able to see people of color around, I. This sounds really bad. My wife and I were worried moving to a small town that we would be raising our kids in a racist environment because there wasn't a lot of diversity, and we were afraid that not being able to expose him to people of color might lead down a bad road. And I'm a little ashamed to have to say, but I didn't know that there were as many people of color in my community as there actually are, because our community is still relatively segregated, which makes it really complicated. But we hope that the world is getting better, that we're making progress towards equality and hopefulness. But that's kind of the complicated nature of the world.
Like this poem.
See, I brought it back to the
Yeah, you
poem.
brought
I'm a
it back.
genius. You're welcome.
Nicole, I have a question. Why freshly woven spider webs?
I don't know. It sounded good. At least in my 17 or 18, I guess I was 18 years. Yeah, my 18-year-old had freshly woven spider webs and tangled vines of ivy. It sometimes I don't choose for precision. I choose based on how it sounds. And I think
Sure.
at that time it sounded good to me.
Yeah, I love the sound of it, but like freshly doesn't sound melancholy to me. Like I think of like a drab, like almost cobweb in a corner. That's melancholy. I think of freshly woven spiderwebs as like that's shining with the silver dew, and yeah. Oh, that's funny. Oh man, I wish we had enough time to dive into your exploration of French poetry.
Well, we can table that for a different time.
Yeah.
I've got plenty of bad poetry, so if you ever want me to return and read some more for you, I'm it's my pleasure to do that for you.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
I'm almost thinking we should do like an open mic with all of our previous guests, just like sharing bad poetry after bad poetry. But
That would be a really cool reading, actually. I would love to do that.
That
I
could be
think it would
really
be
fun.
really cool to get us all together and do a bad poetry reading. We just have to, sometimes we just have to have reasons to laugh. And also it helps us to see the progress. As I was telling you earlier when we were warming up, I really enjoy seeing how I've progressed as a poet from that time until now. So to me, I'm kind of proud to read these bad poems for you because I got that out of my system, and now I think I can write some pretty decent ones. I mean, I'll let other people be the judge of that, but I think I've progressed at least a little bit here over the years.
I would think so.
Yeah. I mean, I can say from my unprofessional opinion, but from reading something kindred, it leaps and bounds better than
my Emily Dickenson phase.
Yeah. Not to knock your 17-year-old self, but I think you have improved.
Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. It really does.
Before we let you go, one of your reviewers used a phrase that I had never heard, a poetry term that I've never, or maybe it's not even a poetry term. It's a literary term I've never heard before, and maybe you can shed some light onto it. Belle lettre? I butcher French, but
yeah. So, well, if we were to say in English, just belles lettres, it's basically a particular style that's written primarily for an aesthetic effect. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, but it means beautiful or fine writing is the direct translation of it. But in a more narrow sense, it's usually works that don't necessarily fall into like a specific literary genre, but they're very, very focused on their aesthetic effect.
Okay. So this combination of prose and confession and poetry, your reviewer, Richard Blanco,
yeah.
There we go.
Richard Blanco, presidential inaugural poet, calls this collection something kindred, beautiful writing, belle lettre.
It's okay. We know what you mean.
Yeah. No, my sister's probably just rolling her eyes when she hears this. Yeah. Well, Nicole, we know that you have other obligations and more important places to be, but we have been honored to have you here. Oh, I spelled here wrong. Oh, gosh. How embarrassing.
No one can see it.
Yeah, that's true.
No, we're going to post this just so that everybody can see how good Aaron is at spelling.
Oh, gosh. We have been honored to have you here unofficially representing the office of the mayor of Miami-Dade. But before you leave here at My Bad Poetry, we end each week with the words of a true poet. So would you be willing to share one of your poems from something kindred with us today?
Absolutely. It would be my pleasure. I think I'm going to choose, since I read you some shorter poems, I'm going to choose a shorter one as well. Sure. This one's called On Finding Your Ashes in My Suitcase. And this is for my mother, Nancy. It's unfortunately based on a true story. So, on finding your ashes in my suitcase, I think you would laugh if I told you. Your urn exploded somewhere during my flight back to Miami. And when I got home, I found you spilled your ashes all over the inside of my luggage. Actually, it was your luggage. The Liz Claiborne zebra print carry-on with the dragon fruit interior. The flight was oversold, so I was forced to check you in your luggage. What kind of monster makes a grieving daughter check her own mother?
Wow.
Yeah. I feel awful saying this, but when I read this, I did laugh.
You should.
Yeah, okay. Because like the minute I got to the line, your urn exploded somewhere, I was just like, oh no.
Well, and that's just so cool. Like it's a beautiful, like, I didn't know whether to laugh or like to sympathize or to cry that's a fascinating poem, and I'm so sorry that happened.
Yeah, I am too.
Oh,
Yeah, it was really terrible, but
yeah.
I tried to find a way to make it better. And with Something Kindred, the book was a continuing conversation with my mother, and it was like me telling her these things that I think she would find funny, or
Mm.
that I think she would want to know. In this case, I was just imagining myself telling my mother, I cannot believe this happened. I had your urn in my suitcase when I was flying back to Miami, and the damn thing exploded. And I got home, and your ashes are all over my clothes.
Yeah.
I mean, she would have laughed. She would have for sure laughed. And I wanted to tell her that. And also, in the moment, it was very traumatic. But I look back on it now and I say, that was a rare moment. And how often does that happen to people? My goodness,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I had to turn it into something. But yeah, your reaction is perfectly legitimate. I mean, I was expecting that people would probably laugh. And I wanted them to.
Well, Something Kindred is an amazing book that came out this year, right?
Yes, February of 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it can be found.
You can buy it Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target, and then or directly through the press, the Southern Collective Experience Press.
And it's best to go through the press. Again, Nicole, this has been great. I know you got to go, but this has been My Bad Poetry.
Now go write your own bad poetry. Good luck, especially with the in-laws.
Thank you.
You can cut that out. But.
Oh no, we're leaving that in.
I'm leaving
That
that in for the
stays.
end tag. That's the end tag.
Oh my goodness. All right. Thank you both so much again.
Bye, Nicole.
Bye bye.
Bye. Take care.
Rhyme or free doesn't matter. It's my bad poetry.